The battle for the White House coming down to a very competitive final few days. The latest Real Clear Politics map showing Hillary Clinton's lead has eroded in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. It once looked like it would be a sure thing for her. Now it's rolled a toss-up. Let's bring in Terry Madonna, the director of the Franklin and Marshall College poll and the founder of the Keystone poll. Terry, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, we want to start by looking at the Real Clear Politics average in Pennsylvania. Obviously compiles a number of top polls there. It is worth 20 electoral votes, by the way, a key state. It shows Clinton up by 2.5 percentage points as part of the split, part of the average at this point. The Clinton campaign calling out, the big names. She will be there in Philadelphia with the president, first lady, I think on Monday as well. How important and critical is this state to her for winning?
Oh, I think it's extremely critical. Imagine this. She now leads slightly in Florida. She has a lead in my state, along with Michigan and Virginia and Wisconsin and Minnesota. If she holds on to all of them and loses Ohio and the states that Trump now leads in, she still gets a path to 270. But the critical state could come down to be Florida. If she loses Pennsylvania and Trump were to win Florida and Ohio, then I think he has a path. To the White House. And what's fascinating is Pennsylvania, for 6 straight elections, has gone for the Democrats. But 4 years ago, Pennsylvania was the 6th closest state. Of course, the top 3 in terms of closeness were Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. So those 4 states have really been targeted by both campaigns. As you accurately point out, multiple visits. In fact, they might be able to claim Pennsylvania residency if they hang out in our state much longer.
Yeah. Okay, you talk
right.
about the shift there in Pennsylvania. How much of that do you think this time around has to be with Trump's made a very direct appeal to blue-collar workers, to coal miners, to people who are in manufacturing, those kinds of things, and has emphasized how much their jobs have been hurt by policies over the last 8 years of the Democrats. Do you think that's resonating with them? Is that why he's closed the gap there a little bit?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, that was its initial support base. It's in western Pennsylvania, up in the Northeast, as you accurately point out, where coal was king and steel was king, and all of these huge industries were part of the great industrial era for our country. The jobs have gone away. Trump's biggest support comes from white blue-collar workers, high school educations or less. They are beyond fanatical in favor of him. And conversely, he has to do better with women in the Philadelphia suburbs, where 1 in every 5 voters is cast, where the bulk of college-educated voters live. And it's sort of that back and forth with those groups. Now that the race has gotten closer, he's doing better with women voters. He's losing them. He's doing better with college-educated voters. He's losing them. But he has closed the gap, Shannon, and that's important, particularly in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania.
Okay, you mentioned Florida, so I want to make sure we go through those numbers as well. Again, these are averages, and Mrs. Clinton maintains a 1.2% lead there. All of these are within the margin of error. We have the third-party candidates. We continue to list Gary Johnson and Jill Stein there, but it seems like the closer we get to people actually having to go into the booth and make a decision, many of them, as we always see, are dropping away from the third parties. How much do you think that they'll factor into the final results on Election Day in a race this tight?
Yeah, well, look, what we have had throughout the campaign is a larger uncertainty in the election. Not just voters who are saying, well, I haven't made up my mind, but voters who say, yes, I'm going to vote for Trump or I'm going to vote for Clinton, but I could still change my mind. And then you have, as you point out, the third-party candidates, and their support has slipped because voters there are saying, well, I better vote for one of the other the two major party candidates. Mostly going back to Clinton. That's why she was able to build up a lead about 2 weeks ago. The fact of the matter is that it's still larger than normal. In other words, the volatility is larger than we saw 4 years ago, even 8 years ago, and that difference could be very important in a state like Florida.
Okay, North Carolina, we have a very tight race there. And again, in the averages, Trump is up by 0.8%, so less than a point. That has been a state that it was red more traditionally in recent races, but we've got a really tight re-election race there for Senator Richard Burr, the Republican who's trying to hold on to his seat. He's got a very tough challenge. Any hints that you get as to where North Carolina may go election night? Yeah,
well, that's been traditionally a red state. Barack Obama won it in 2008, but of course Mitt Romney won it 4 years ago. I would think Trump, who leads there now, as you point out, narrowly, if his voters there, particularly in the rural parts of the state, are as enthusiastic as some of the polls show, and back in my state in the polls, his voters are more enthusiastic than the Democratic voters are. And the big problem that Clinton has in some states with, you know, a significant African-American population that make a difference. My state is one, North Carolina is one, Florida is one. Obviously, Hispanics very important in Florida as well. The Clinton campaign throughout the country in these key states are very nervous about the enthusiasm of African-American voters. That's why they spent a lot of time, you know, going into the neighborhoods, trying to ratchet up the vote. If it falls back, and by the way, more African Americans voted in our country as a proportion of their population 4 years ago than whites for the first time in American history. So you can see how important that's going to be in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and a couple of other states. And that enthusiasm means a lot to the outcome of the election in some of these critical states.
It absolutely could be. All right, Terry Madonna, thank you so much for your analysis. It's great to see you tonight.
Thank you.